The gate clicked shut behind me, and I started walking toward my sister's car. I took a deep breath. The air where I was walking was the same as the air on the other side of the wall, but somehow it smelled fresher and sweeter. Marcy put her arm around me and said, "Before I take you home, is there anything you want to do? Maybe want to go out?" "Yeah, I guess there is. I'd love to have a cold beer." "You got it. Bud's Bar would be okay with you?" "You bet." As we drove away from the gray stone walls, I remembered what had brought me there. It was a divorce. It was a very, very unpleasant divorce. An event you could never have imagined on that beautiful July day when Amy was walking down the aisle toward me under the arm of her father. Amy and I had been a couple since second grade. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that we weren't getting married. We were forever. It was a romance that was supposed to have a fairy tale ending. And they lived happily ever after. We agreed to wait until after college to get married and also not to have children until we were 30. We wanted to go places and do lots of things before settling down. Of course, not everything was like a fairy tale. Twice, in 11th grade and her sophomore year of college, Amy felt she had to find out what other guys were like. In high school, that period lasted only 3 weeks. Amy came back and said she was sorry and that she had done something stupid. "I dated 5 guys and they were all assholes. I had the best one, but I almost blew it." I was so busy with classes and sports that I didn't even think about dating other girls. I pulled myself together and said to myself, "Okay, if you want to find out about other guys, I'll just go out and find out what other girls are like." We both found good jobs in our respective specialties, and the next 4 years were pretty good. I had to travel a bit for work, but it wasn't very often, and the trips never lasted longer than 3 days. The day after her 26th birthday, Amy informed me that she was pregnant. I was surprised, since we had agreed to wait until she was 30 to start a family. She told me that according to her doctor, the medication she had taken during the flu had negated her birth control pills. 9 months later, Brian Louie joined us. Amy had only been off work for 6 weeks. The building where she worked had a daycare center, so she went back to work and took Brian with her. After 9 months, she said that now that we had started a family, she wanted to have another baby so they would be closer together and easier to raise. I didn't care, so I agreed, and 6 weeks later she said I was going to be a dad again. At 8 months, she said she thought 2 kids was enough, and would I mind if she got her tubes tied? My attitude was that it was her body, and if she didn't want to go 9 months pregnant, who was I to say she should? A month later, Susan Marie was born to us. As with Brian, Amy was only off work for 6 weeks and then went back to work, bringing both babies with her. Over the next 6 years, Amy and I were promoted twice, and we made good money. We seemed like the perfect couple. We rarely fought about anything and were still quite active in the bedroom. We had similar likes and dislikes. We enjoyed visiting each other and doing things together, and we were happy to see each other when we got home from work each day. But the happy home life loving couple thing turned out to be a lie, as I found out one beautiful July day. I flew to Denver to visit one of our suppliers to find out why they were having supply issues. The trip was scheduled for 3 days, but upon arrival, I discovered that the company had previously been arrested by the IRS for non-payment of payroll taxes. It turned out that the company had been in financial trouble for some time. I turned around and headed back to the airport to catch the next flight home. It didn't occur to me to call Amy and let her know I was coming home early, which was a good thing, because if I had, I might never have known what I'd done. I got home at 5:20 and Amy hadn't gotten home from work yet. I thought about starting dinner, but then decided to take Amy and the kids out to dinner. I was in the room we had set up as a home office when I heard the garage door opener start up, and that told me Amy was home. By the time I had completed the steps to save my work and then log out of the computer program I was in, Amy was already entering the house. I was just opening the door to the study when I heard Amy's voice, and then I heard a male voice. And then there was a sound that made my insides freeze. I pulled out my cell phone and set it to take a picture, and then headed into the living room. I knew who I'd see when I walked in on them. Hal was Amy's boss at work, and I'd met him and his wife at Amy's Christmas parties, picnics, and other company social events. Amy had no way of knowing I was home. On the way to the airport, I left the car at the dealership for a factory brake repair, and it wasn't ready until the next day, so I took a cab home from the airport. They were very surprised when I walked in to see them. I managed to get 5 good shots before they realized I was in the room, and 3 more when they were frantically pulling away from each other. I dropped my phone in my pocket and headed over to Hal. He read from my face what I was planning to do, and unfortunately, at least from my perspective, was not between him and the door. That way, he was able to turn and rush to the door before I could reach him. I still would have been able to grab him, but as I passed Amy, she stuck her foot out and tripped me. By the time I regained my balance, Hal was already out the door and out of sight. I turned, walked past Amy into the kitchen, pulled the phone book out of the cabinet where we kept it, and flipped through it until I reached Harold Bartram. I picked up the phone and was dialing numbers when Amy came into the room and asked, "What are you doing?" "Calling Janet Bartram to share the news with her." Amy hurried over and unplugged the phone cord from the socket, saying at the same time, "Don't do that. You'll only cause trouble." "You don't think we don't have problems already, do you?" "I mean between Hal and Janet." "Hal can mess up my life and I have to be careful not to mess up his?" "That's not the point. There's no need to hurt Janet. She's the innocent party here." "I don't think so. She's married to a cheating asshole and she should know it. If she accepts it, fine, but from now on I intend to make his life hell. First, I will tell Janet everything and offer to show her the pictures if she wants to see them. Then, I'll hire a lawyer and harass him at work. I'm sure your company has a policy and procedures manual, and I'll bet there's something in there about a supervisor-subordinate relationship, and then I'll go looking for him and catch him. You wouldn't want to do any of that because it would cost you too much." "How do you envision it?" "You'll go to Janet and she'll kick him out, and I'll kick you out and put him in here with me and our kids. You'll file a lawsuit against our company, and I'll get fired along with Hal, and without a job, that means I'll wipe you out in a divorce and get huge alimony and child support. If you find him and beat him, you'll go to jail for assault. It would be better if you forget about all of this, and we just move on with our lives." "You're kidding. Move on with our lives after what I just found out?" "Why not? Hal and I have been dating for a long time, and it's never hurt us. We have a good life. I've been a great wife to you, we get along great, and I really love you. Can you entertain that asshole and then tell me you love me?" "Why not? It's the truth. Hal is just entertainment to me. Nothing more, just entertainment. Nothing like adding insult to insult. I catch you cheating and you say I'm not fit for the bedroom." "I didn't say you were bad for the bedroom." "Then why are you having fun with other men?" "I don't have fun with other men. Since we've been married, I've only been with Hal." "You know what I mean." "Look, honey, you're a great guy. You're a great husband and father, and you're good in the bedroom, but Hal gives me something you can't." "Wonderful, just wonderful. I'm a great husband and father, but I'm only good in the bedroom. That's so nice to know." "I didn't mean it to sound that way. You're fine in the bedroom. We have a great life." "Apparently not good enough." "You're fine, baby. I swear to you, you're just fine. But Hal is offering me something I need that you just can't give me." "Yeah? What's that?" "It shouldn't matter, honey. We've had a perfect life up until now. There's no reason why we can't continue to have a good life. It's not hurting us, dear, and it's been going on for years. We'll be fine, I promise." I just shook my head and said, "You're unreal, Amy. You're just completely out of your depth if you think we can go on after what I've seen. But I have to admit that I'm curious. You say this has been going on for years. How many years and how did it start?" "It started before I even met Hal. It started when I was in college and we broke up because I wanted to see what other guys could be like. There were 5 of them." "This raises 2 questions. First, why didn't you marry one of them?" "Because they were all assholes. I needed more than just a feeling and I loved you, so I left them." "The second question is, why did you tell me we couldn't do this until we were married?" "I loved you and I knew I did. But after my experience with 5 men, I stopped paying attention to them altogether. Everything was fine until at one of the company Christmas parties you couldn't make it because you were on a business trip. I think it was to Seattle. Anyway, I drank more than I should have and felt differently when Hal danced with me. That's how I spent the next 2 nights with him. We were doing well until he met and married Janet. We still flirted with each other, but it wasn't until Janet got pregnant and started refusing to have fun that we started seeing each other again. And then we never broke up again. Again, honey, it didn't hurt us one bit. I need to stop by my sister's and pick up the kids. You're even making your sister cover for you while you cheat on me? Don't be silly, Rob. She thinks I'm working late. I asked her to watch the kids when they got home from school. They went straight from school to her house, and now I have to pick them up. When I get back, I'll show you that nothing has changed. I stood there looking at her in bewilderment as she walked away to get into her car. She hadn't heard us? Only because I never knew. Going to show me that nothing had changed when she got home? Did she expect me to be careless seconds after her liaison with Hal? It was damned unlikely. I plugged the phone back in and called Janet. She was not pleased to hear what I had said and asked when we could meet so she could look at the pictures I had taken, and we agreed to meet for lunch the next day. She asked me not to tell Amy that I had called because Amy would be sure to call Hal and let him know about it. I'm not going to do anything until I have proof, and then I'll meet with him. I went upstairs and started moving my stuff from the bedroom to the guest bedroom. I was hanging my suits in my closet when a very bad thought hit me. When Amy said she was going to kick me out, she said, "He can move in here with me and our kids." When she said that, I wasn't paying attention, but after thinking about it afterwards, I realized that she made it sound like the kids were hers and Hulse's. Could that be the case? I remembered her telling me that she had started dating Hal. My trip to Seattle was about a year before she told me she was pregnant with Brian, so Hal could very well be the father of my children. God help them both if I found out he was. I was just putting away the last of my things when Amy came home with the kids. She came to get me, and finding me in the guest room asked, "What are you doing?" "Making space between us." "Why? I told you that when I came back I would show you that nothing had changed." "Have you forgotten what I witnessed 2 hours ago? You think I'm going to settle for Hal's sloppy seconds?" "Oh, for God's sake, Rob, it never hurt you. But okay, I'm going to take a shower first." "You just don't understand. I don't want anything to do with your cheating ass." "You're being stupid about this, Rob. I don't love Hal, I love you. I have something with Hal, but I make love to you." "Brett, you certainly didn't say you loved me when you said you were going to kick me out and let Hal move in with you. And I didn't feel much love when you told me how you were going to destroy me in the divorce." "I didn't mean it that way. I just wanted to make you stop and think before you called Janet." "Well, I did do some thinking, Amy, and that's why I moved into this bedroom." "We're adults, Rob, and we can talk things out and come to an agreement. Nothing has changed. I still love you. Just not enough to keep you from hanging horns on me. Just leave me alone, Amy." I left the room and went to the kids. I helped them with their homework and then played with them until bedtime. After putting them to bed, I went to my new bedroom and started getting ready for bed. As I turned off the light, I heard the shower running and remembered what Amy had said. God, what a stupid bitch! I was just dozing off when the door opened and Amy walked into the room. She got into bed with me. I quickly sat up and pushed her off me. "What part of I want nothing to do with your cheating ass did you not understand?" "Stay the hell away from me, Amy." "Damn it, Rob, I love you. We can work this out. I know we can." "No, Amy, we can't. There's no way in hell we can. Now get out of here." She got up off the floor and left the room, and I tried to go back to sleep. Next chapter. It had been a nasty night. Amy was already up and making breakfast, but I just walked past her, grabbed my car keys off the rack, and left the house. I had breakfast at the Village Inn and then went to work. At 10 o'clock, I called Mike Hooper, a good friend who was also an attorney, and told him my sad story and then asked if I could make an appointment to meet with him and talk about the divorce. He said he would meet me at Bud's bar at 5:30. I plugged my cell phone into my computer and transferred all the pictures of Amy and Bartram that I had taken and then printed out 3 sets and put them in envelopes. At noon, I arrived at Mario's and saw that Janet was already there. She came up to meet me and I kissed her on the cheek and said, "I wish we had met under happier circumstances." We made small talk until we ordered, and then I told her about what had happened the day before. I handed her an envelope with the pictures I had taken, and she took them out and looked at them. I was surprised at how calmly she looked at them. She put them back in the envelope and said, "What are you going to do?" "Divorce her." "There's no chance of making things right?" "No, not after seeing everything with my own eyes." "Well, I guess I'll have to do the same. This isn't the first time his big penis has gotten him in trouble. I forgave him last time, but I told him that if it happens again, he'll stay in the past. You may not get a chance to kick him out. I'll look for him, and when I find him, I'll beat him to a pulp. He may end up in the hospital. You can take all his things and pile them up in the hospital room. If you catch him, kick him in the balls a couple times from me." I told her I would, and then we got up and left. Meeting Mike only confirmed what I already knew. We lived in a no-fault state, so everything would be split 50-50. Amy would get the kids, and I would pay child support. But since our incomes were pretty much equal, I wouldn't have to pay child support, or separate maintenance as it was called in our state. I told him that I was concerned that the children were not mine, and he advised me to get a DNA test. I gave him 2 sets of photos and told him I wanted Bartram to be sued for alienation of affection and the company where they both worked to be sued for failure to comply with CP&P, which said there could be no fraternal relationship between supervisors and subordinates. "Are you sure you want to do this? It could cost Amy her job, and then you'd probably have to pay child support separately." "I don't care, Mike. Just do it." We discussed a few more things, and he cautioned me against moving out of the house and giving her possession. I couldn't kick her out because of the kids, so I should just make every effort to coexist until the divorce situation solidified and the court gave direction. Let the court decide who stays and who goes. But keep in mind that the courts in this state almost always side with the wife if there are children involved. "You're in for a rough ride, buddy. Are you sure you and Amy can't work things out?" "Just look at the pictures. They don't show the sounds I heard when I looked at the 2 of them, but the visuals and sounds are imprinted in my brain. So no, there's no chance we'll get back together and work things out. Just spring into action and file for her as soon as possible. Get her and Hal on the job if you can arrange it." Amy wasn't smiling when I got home. "You just had to do it. We could have worked it out and gotten over it, but you just had to go and tell Janet. She kicked him out of the house, all because of you." "Not because of me, Amy, but because of what you and he were doing. And I'm sorry she kicked him out. It's only going to make it harder to find him. Just remember I warned you, Rob." That night I got up at 3 o'clock while everyone else in the house was asleep and used cotton swabs to swipe the cheeks of the sleeping kids. On my way to work, I dropped off the swabs at a local lab and offered to pay extra if I could expedite the tests. Something in Amy's words, "Just remember I warned you, Rob," hit me, and I was at the bank when the doors to the lobby opened at 9. I cleared out all the accounts in the safe, went down the street to another bank, and opened an account in my name only. I would have to account for it later in the divorce, but at least I would have the funds to pay for the house and take care of the kids. Another thought occurred to me at the office, and I called and canceled all of our joint credit cards so Amy couldn't top up the balance by getting cash. It's a good thing I did all that, because when I got home that night, a man came up to me, handed me an envelope, and said, "You are being served, and I would advise you to move at least 500 feet away from this house, because in the envelope is a temporary restraining order." I opened the envelope, and there was indeed a restraining order stating that I could not come within 500 feet of the house, Amy and the kids. Her lawyer obviously worked much faster than Mike, but I guess in his defense he didn't know speed was required, and neither did I. I looked up at the house and saw Amy standing there smirking. I backed the car out of the driveway, reached the corner and called Mike on his cell phone. I brought him up to speed and asked him how I could get into the house to get my stuff, and he said he had friends in the sheriff's department, and he would see what he could do and call me back. While he was on the phone, I told him to change the divorce wording from irreconcilable differences to adultery and start going after Bartram, Amy, and Bartram's company with a vengeance. Burn them, Mike! Burn them! He called me back 15 minutes later and told me that 2 sheriff's deputies would be there within half an hour and would make sure I had access to the house, but until he could contact someone from the court to arrange further action. All I could take out of the house was my clothes and toiletry items. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of the house. I started the car, pulled away, and parked behind them. They introduced themselves and told me to stay put until they called me, and then walked up to the house and rang the bell. Amy answered, and after a short conversation, the sheriff's deputies let me through. They warned me that I could only take clothes and toiletries, and I followed them into the house. As I reached the stairs, I peeked into the kitchen to see if there were any children. There were none, but there was Hal sitting at the kitchen table drinking a beer. Beer that I had bought and paid for. I couldn't help myself from going after him, but that would have been stupid with 2 sheriff's deputies around. Amy followed us upstairs and stood in the doorway watching me pack. It was childish of me, but I couldn't help myself, so I lied and said, without looking in her direction, "You blew it, Amy. You really screwed up this time. I spent most of the day at the office thinking about us and finally decided that we could sit down and work things out. After all, you swore you loved me." Some love, Amy, mental cruelty, a restraining order. We don't stand a chance now, Amy. Think about it after I've gone. We were hours away from staying together, but you blew it, and Hal sitting in the kitchen drinking my beer drove the nail in. I closed my suitcase, turned, and walked out of the house. The next day, Amy called me at work. "In light of what you said last night at the house, I'd like to sit down and talk to you." Not a chance, Amy. What you did to me last night, plus Hal sitting in the house you locked me out of, ended it all and destroyed any chance for us. Besides, I can't sit down and talk to you. You've set things up so that I can't get within 500 feet of you, remember? Goodbye, Amy. 2 days later, I was back at the house with 2 men from the court who were to supervise the removal of my belongings from the house. The whole time I was there, Amy demanded that I sit down and talk to her, but I ignored her until I carried the last load to U-Haul. We were in the bedroom, and she mumbled that we could work things out if I just talked to her. I invited her to come over, and when she did, I pointed to the bathroom in the master bedroom. She saw what I was pointing to, and her face fell. There were men's toiletries on the counter, and they weren't mine. I didn't use Old Spice or Men in Speed Stick. Goodbye, Amy. Just remember that what's coming your way, you brought it on yourself, and it was avoidable. Next chapter. After that, events moved quickly. Amy was served with papers at work with a countersuit alleging adultery. Hal, also at work, was served papers accusing him of alienating affection. Their employer was being sued for failing to follow part of the policy and procedure manual regarding supervisor-subordinate relationships, resulting in the dissolution of my marriage. 3 days later, both Hal and Amy were fired. Hal, being Amy's boss, was on the losing end, but Amy fought for her termination, claiming that Hal had threatened to take away her job if she didn't give in to him. The company didn't buy it and supported her termination, so Amy hired a lawyer to sue them for wrongful termination. She and Hal must have agreed that what Amy claimed was the right thing to do, because while all this was going on, they were still living in our house. 3 weeks after I filed, there was a hearing to extend the temporary restraining order, and the judge denied it and berated Amy's lawyer for filing it in the first place. A week later, there was a preliminary divorce hearing. Mike warned me that things wouldn't go in my favor. They'll almost certainly give Amy temporary custody of the kids and full use of the house until the terms of the divorce are worked out, and you'll be required to continue paying for the house and utilities. You will likely also be awarded temporary alimony and child support. Her attorney is also pushing to get the money you withdrew from the accounts, and I'm sure the judge will bring that up. I handed him the envelope and said, "This may affect the alimony issue." He opened it, read what was inside, and said, "Damn, Rob, I feel so sorry for you. Any idea who the real father is? I'm willing to bet Amy's life that they're from Hal. It probably won't affect this hearing in any way because it's just a preliminary hearing and Child Protective Services will want to authenticate the documents, but it will definitely affect the final ruling." Will I get a chance to speak? Yes, but I'd be very careful what I say if I were you. Everything went pretty much as Mike had said it would. Amy got the house, the kids, and temporary child support. I was ordered to pay Amy half of what I had withdrawn from my accounts and savings, but somehow the 5 certificates of deposit went unnoticed, and I certainly didn't mention them. Amy's lawyer tried to get the judge to order me to pay his fees, but Mike objected. This is not a case where my client sues for divorce and his wife is forced to answer. In this case, she sued my client, and he only responded. Since his wife initiated the lawsuit, she should be responsible for her legal fees. The judge decided the matter in our favor, and that brought a smile to my face. When the judge, following the advice of Child Protective Services, ordered child support, Mike objected and presented a document of DNA test results showing that I was not the biological father of the children. I was ordered to pay temporary child support until CPS confirmed the document. If the documents prove to be true, any child support you pay will be deducted from your wife's share of the distribution. I watched Amy when Mike brought up the paternity of the children, and she showed no surprise. The bitch knew everything from the beginning. As the case came to a close, the judge asked me if I fully understood the court orders. I understand what you said, but I don't understand why. Why did my adulterous wife get custody of the children? Surely it's not advantageous for them to live with a woman who put her lover in the house the very day she sued me for divorce. What kind of example is that to them? We haven't even lived apart for 6 weeks, and she already has another man in her bed. And why should I keep house just so the man my whore wife is cheating on me with can have a roof over his head? All the judge did was order CPS to investigate my allegations and report back to him within 10 days. As we were leaving the courtroom, Amy approached me and said, "How could you do this to your children?" "They're not mine, Amy, and I saw your face when Mike brought up DNA. There was no surprise on your face, Amy. No surprise at all. You knew about it all along. Just another thing I owe you for." "Yeah, sure, whatever you say. Just make sure I have the money tomorrow." And she walked away. She didn't know it, but as far as getting even a penny of that money was concerned, she wasn't going to get anything. At least not anytime soon. I figured I could hold out for a few weeks before I was dragged into court and threatened with contempt of court if I didn't pay up. Even then, I could probably hold out for another week or two. Next chapter. The day after the hearing, Mike called me to let me know that Amy's former employer had offered a settlement. "It's a little low, and I think we can get more than that," he said. "I'll leave it up to you since you're the expert on these cases. Although, to be honest, the only reason I sued them was to fuck with Amy and Bartram. I was content to let them get away with it. While we're on the subject, you know we won't get anything from Bartram, especially since he's unemployed and what little he can find will go to his wife for child support and alimony." "Never mind. Keep it up and make him pay a lawyer. If we win, we can get a judgment against him, and that will always hang over him like a big black cloud." Mike's mention of Hal having to pay child support reminded me that I hadn't talked to Janet in a while. I called her and asked how things were going. "Not great. Things are a little tight since Hal isn't working and isn't paying what the court ordered him to pay. Fortunately, I emptied the bank accounts before I kicked him out. I hate to tell you this, but the situation is likely to get worse. It turns out that both of my kids have a biological father, Hal, and he'll probably have to pay Amy child support by the time we get divorced. Or maybe not, since they're living together." "Living together? I didn't know that. How are you doing with the lawsuit against Hal's old company?" "I have no claim against them." "Why would you?" I explained to her, and she thanked me for the information and said she'd have her lawyer look into it. Then I said, If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. I hope you're not assuming what I'm thinking. And what is? Just because Hal screwed your wife doesn't mean I'm going to do it to you to get even. That's a disgusting thought. I'm sorry I bothered you. And I hung up. What she said at the end of the conversation left a bad taste in my mouth and ruined my mood, and I stayed in that mood all day. By the time I got home from work, I wanted to hurt someone, so I decided it was time to deal with Hal. Figuring that since he was out of work, he'd be looking for one, I arranged to take the next day off and parked outside the house at 6 in the morning. The kids left for school at 7:20, and at 8 I saw Hal's Chevy Blazer pull out of my garage and head down the street. I followed him to the parking lot downtown. I parked 3 spaces away from him, got out of the car, and ducked down. I got between him and the elevator, and when he walked over to where I crouched, I stood up and said, "Good morning, Hal. At least for me, but I'm not sure it will be for you." He turned and tried to run away, but I grabbed him and beat the crap out of him. Not surprisingly, 2 cops showed up at work the next day and arrested me for assault and battery. I spent the night in jail, and the next day I went in front of a judge. The charges were read to me. They asked me how I behaved, and I said, "Not guilty." "Are you sure you want to plead not guilty? Mr. Bartram is quite sure that you were his abuser." "Oh, I definitely stomped his ass, but I'm not guilty of assault and battery." "No? What would you call it then?" "Making sure justice is served." "I don't understand your thinking." "He entertained my wife behind my back for years. He fathered 2 children that he and my whore ex-wife led me to believe were mine, and he had to pay for it." "Maybe so, but there is no law against adultery in this state. And so I had to seek justice on my own." "The law? I don't care about the law. The legal system sucks when it comes to cases like mine. My wife cheats on me for years, leaves me children with her lover, and what do the courts do? They reward her. She gets the house and I'm required to pay for it and its upkeep. And while I do that, she moves her lover there and I end up paying for him to have a roof over his head. I have to pay alimony to her cheating ass, and when the divorce becomes final, she gets half of everything. She cheats, and the courts reward her and the injured party, me, gets what he deserves from the same legal system you so extol. If the law won't do right by me, I must do it myself. You have broken the law anyway, and by your own admission you admit it." "No, I don't. I admit that I am seeking the justice that is due me. I am perfectly willing for a jury to hear my story and render a verdict." "You may be ready, but I have no intention of allowing the court to waste resources on this case. You admitted in open court that you, as you put it, stomped his ass, so I have no choice but to find you guilty and sentence you to 6 months in the Fairmont County Jail." "Thank you." "I beg your pardon?" "You've just helped me get justice for my wife. She will receive no alimony or child support for 6 months. I won't pay for the house, and since she was laid off from her job, she has no money and won't be able to pay for the house. The house will be foreclosed on, and she and her lover will be thrown out on the street. And 6 months in jail means I'll lose my job, and she won't be able to get any money from me when I get out, so yeah, thanks." "Would you throw away all the equity in your house?" "What equity? We took out a second one so we could install central air conditioning and a pool. If we sell it, we'll get enough to cover expenses and commissions, and we'll split a couple thousand between us. I'd rather she lose even that much. I'm not getting anything anyway. By the time I get out of jail, I'll owe her 6 months of alimony, and I'm sure this wonderful legal system of yours will see to it that my portion of the proceeds is forfeited and given to her to cover the arrears." The judge merely shook his head. Next chapter. I spent 4 months in the county jail. Mike visited me once a week, and on the 3rd visit he said he had an offer from Amy's old company that he thought we should accept, and I told him to accept it. "Cash the check as soon as you get it, and put the money somewhere Amy can't get to it." At the end of the 1st month, I had an unexpected visitor. Amy came to visit me. When you are in prison, they don't let anyone in to see you. You have to give them a list of people you want to see, and if someone not on that list comes to see you, they come up to you and ask if you want to see that person. Amy wasn't on my list, but curiosity made me agree to see her. I sat down across from her, with the partition of the dating room between us. Amy smiled and said, "Orange is not your color." "My closet is somewhat limited here. What do you want, Amy?" "I want you to arrange for me to get some money. I need to pay the house payment and utility bills. I haven't been able to get a job and things are tight. I have to struggle to feed the kids." "So what? If your asshole lover had taken his beatings for granted for entertaining my wife instead of suing me, I wouldn't be here and your money problems wouldn't be so serious. But he put me here, so put your money problems on him. What about the food on the table for the kids? They're his kids. Let him feed them." "How can you say that?" "True, he was a donor, but you're their father. You're the only father they've ever known. They don't know anything about Hal. They know he's in our house and that you're having fun with him, even though, by the way, you're still married to me. I mean, you're their father, Rob. You've been there for them since day one and loved them to death, right up until you found out about Hal and me. You can't just reject that love, Rob. They've done nothing to hurt you. Hate me, but don't take what I did out on them. The problem is, Amy, if I give you money for food, it won't just be the kids eating that food. I'll be feeding you and Bartram, too. I've loved you too long to ever raise my hand to you and do what I did to Bartram, but I have no trouble at all watching you both starve. Don't you care that we'll lose the house if you don't help? You mean the house you locked me out of? The house you've been partying with your lover in at every opportunity? That house has meant nothing to me since you put Bartram in it. You need to look for work more, Amy, and you need to push Bartram to be the head of your house. He's having a hard time finding work, and what little he finds, Janet manages to get. Gosh, Amy, I'm really, really sorry I ruined your life. What's that thing they always say? Life's a bitch? I got up and left. Next chapter. My only regular visitor was my sister Megan. She came once a week, and on one of her visits, about 3 weeks after Amy's visit, she told me that Amy had called her and asked her to stand up for her and try to get me to give her some money. She swears she will only use it for the kids. I think you should do it, Rob. I don't want the kids to suffer, but I plan to get full custody when I get out, and my only hook is to prove that she can't take care of them properly and that she's setting a bad example for them by living in sin with Bartram. If she and their asshole biological father can't even feed them, the courts will be forced to take notice of me. The fact that I need them, even though Bartram is their donor, should show how much I care about them. If I give her any help at all, it will defeat the purpose. Besides, I don't care what she says because I don't trust her. She's been stabbing me in the back with a smile on her face for 6 years, so there's no way I'm going to believe a word she says. Would you resent me if I helped them? I'm in prison, Megan. I can't stop you from doing whatever you want. Megan did help them, but not with money. She bought the kids clothes, and maybe once a week she took them groceries. I learned from Megan that Amy had finally managed to find a decent paying job, and from her that things were not going well for the family. It seems that since Bartram couldn't find a job worthy of him, he had stopped looking altogether. There were jobs, but apparently they were beneath him in status or didn't pay well enough. From conversations with Megan's children, I learned that Bartram and Amy often fought over him sitting on his butt at home all day. This brought a huge smile to my face. In the 3rd month, I received another unexpected visitor. Janet showed up on the day of the visit. Since she wasn't on my list of visitors, I was asked if I would be willing to take her in. As with Amy, curiosity compelled me to say yes. I remembered our last conversation and wondered why she wanted to see me. There was a sense of déjà vu when I sat down across from her and she said, "Orange is not your color." I've been told that. What brought you here? Guilt. Guilt? What are you guilty of? For treating you badly. Huh? When was that? The last time we talked on the phone. I was in a bad mood, and I've been treating men badly in general, but that's still no reason to tell you what I said, and I apologize for it. Well, I admit it pissed me off, but it was no big deal. We talked some more before she left, and she made me promise to call her when I got out. I spent 4 months in the county jail and was released early when overcrowding became an issue. I was eligible for release because I had already served 2/3 of my sentence, and despite being in jail for assault, which was a felony, I was not a danger to society. And then Mike was waiting for me to give me a ride when I was released. He drove me to a motel with a week's pay, and I got a room until I found an apartment. On the way, he filled me in on the situation. Amy isn't fighting for divorce, but she is going to fight for child custody, child support, and will even try to get child support, although I don't believe she has any chance of getting it. Now that you are gone, I will file a petition for a hearing, and after that it will just be a matter of time. Have you decided what you're going to do with the check you received from Amy's employer? Then we'll just put it out of Amy's reach until the divorce is final. Now that you're out, you can expect to be dragged through the courts again over the funds you owed Amy. That's all right. My excuse will be that I couldn't get the money for her while I was behind bars. They'll say you could have settled. And let that bitch know where my bank is? No fucking way. She'll find a way to get whatever was in there, and with the way the courts in this state bend in favor of women, they'll probably help her. That whore stabbed me in the back and lied to me for years. There's no way I'd believe she wouldn't destroy me if she could. The next morning, I stopped by work and asked Frank if he had any openings, and he told me to get to work and not to pester him with stupid questions. After lunch, I called Amy and told her I wanted to see the kids, to which she laughed. When I have money, you can see the kids. I hung up and called Child Protective Services. I told them I wanted to see the kids, and Amy refused to let me. I was told that it was her right. If she doesn't want me to see them, she can refuse. We checked your paperwork and it was correct. You are not the paternal parent, and she is the maternal parent, so everything is in her hands. Your visitation rights, if any, are to be determined by the court. So I don't have to pay child support? That, too, is for the court to decide. You are currently under a court order to pay child support, so you will have to go to court to have that order lifted. I suppose I can infer from your attitude that my chances of getting custody are unlikely? I'm not at liberty to discuss what our recommendation to the court might be. I thanked her for her time and hung up. I called Amy back and told her I'd be at the kids' house at 7 o'clock and I'd bring the money with me. I won't leave you alone with them. I'll be around the whole time you're visiting. I went to the bank, got $500 and put it in an envelope. At exactly 7 o'clock, I rang the doorbell and Amy opened it. I handed her the envelope, she opened it, saw the money and stepped aside to let me in. I almost lost my senses when I entered the living room and saw Bartram sitting there. I don't know what my face showed, but whatever it was, he glared at me, stood up, and hurried out of the room. Brian and Susan sat on the couch and looked at me. I hadn't seen them in over 4 months and expected them to get up and run to me screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" But they just sat there, and then Susan said the words that eventually landed me in jail. "Why did you hurt our father?" "I thought I was your father." "Mom told us I wasn't, and that Dad Hal was our father." I looked at Amy and saw that she was smirking. I turned away from the kids and headed for the door. Amy laughed and said, "Hurry up!" As I passed her, I snatched the envelope out of her hands and growled, "Eat shit and die, you worthless cunt." Next chapter. After that, events unfolded rapidly. I was dragged to court and ordered to pay Amy what the court had originally ordered, plus child support and alimony. I told the judge I'd die before I gave that cheating whore a dime. He told me to do it, or he would hold me in contempt, and I told him that day was the first time he was right. His gavel fell and he said, $500 or 30 days. I agreed to 30. On the 29th day, I was brought before the judge again, and he asked me if I had reconsidered my position, and I said, to some extent. Would you mind explaining that? I refuse to pay child support for children that even the court knows are not mine, and CPS can confirm that I am not their father. As for child support, I am willing to pay it, but I absolutely refuse to pay for the house, while the woman I am unfortunately still married to has her lover living in the house with her. I will not pay for a roof over this man's head. Evict him and keep him out, and I will pay for the house. Are you telling me that CPS knows you are not the father of the children? Yes. I will continue the hearing until tomorrow, until I can verify your statement to CPS. As I was being led out of the courtroom, I saw the look on Amy's face. She knew that the child support decision would be in my favor, and she was furious. She was so confident that she would be able to screw me over again. The next morning I was in court again, but I was not satisfied with the outcome. The CPS investigation report showed that I was not the children's father, and that Hal was indeed living with Amy. The judge canceled child support and reduced Amy's child support by 1/3, which he did retroactively, but I was still ordered to pay arrearages and house payments. He then surprised everyone, especially Amy, by saying the following. Since Mrs. Latk has taken in a boarder, she can be responsible for all utilities and home insurance. Up to that point, I was ready to say fuck you and be patient for another 30 days, but I suddenly decided to pay up. I thought about it a little strangely. Amy would be furious at what the judge had done, but having me back in jail would cheer her up, so I figured I needed to turn her down. On the other hand, the realization that she would get money from me would cheer her up a little, but the fact that I would pay 1/3 less than she expected, on top of the lack of child support, and the smirk I would bestow on her as we walked out of court would diminish that joy. The judge ordered that the money be in the hands of the court within 48 hours, or he would issue a warrant for my arrest. The smile and smirk I bestowed on Amy as I left the courtroom seemed to anger her, and it made my day better. I was taken back to the jail and released, after which I headed to a restaurant for a proper meal. After eating, I stopped by my sister's house to pick up my stuff that she had taken from my motel when I went to jail. We talked for a while, and I brought up the subject of Amy brainwashing the kids. Megan told me not to take it personally. They're still babies, and since you weren't around, it was only Amy talking to them. Little kids are impressionable. You'll still get a chance to talk to them. But I never did. At the final judgment hearing, I was once again at loose ends. Amy got full custody, and I wasn't even given visitation rights. The CPS report stated that the children's mother and biological father felt that I would be too much of a hindrance in their lives, and since the biological father was going to marry the mother and start a family, the children's best interests would be best served by not having me in their lives. The judge then ruled that Amy would have use of the family home until the children turned 18, at which time the house could be sold and the proceeds divided between us. A stipulation was added that if Amy married, the house could be sold. The reduced alimony was left in place, and I was to pay it for 3 years, or until Amy remarried, whichever came first. I was furious as I walked out of the courtroom, and as I passed Amy, she smiled and gave me the finger. I pondered this for about a week and finally snapped out of it and started making plans. I'll be honest, I wasn't thinking straight, but Amy had already screwed me enough and I just lost my temper. I canceled my insurance and started watching the house, waiting for the right opportunity. 4 days after I canceled the insurance, I got a call from Amy. The mortgage company called and said you canceled your insurance. Yes, you scammed me so much that I'm trying to find ways to reduce my costs. I can get a better rate on the same insurance at Allstate. The mortgage company said they need a policy on the house within 5 days, or they will get the policy and bill you for it. The woman I talked to said it would be to our advantage to get a policy since the insurance company they use is usually pretty expensive. I'll look into it. 2 days after that call, I got the opportunity I had been waiting for. Amy left for work a half hour after the kids left for school, and at 8:30, Bartram pulled out of the garage in his Blazer and drove away. As soon as he was out of sight, I pulled up to the garage and pushed the garage door opener button. Surprise, surprise, it worked. I pulled into the garage and closed the door behind me. Taking both 5-gallon cans of gasoline from the trunk, I went inside. I gave everything inside the house a good dousing and then rolled the car out of the garage. I went back into the house and set it on fire. I drove to the airport, put the car in long-term parking, and got on a plane to Panama City. For a whole month, I lay in the sun and chased girls. I even caught a few of them. On my last day in Panama City, I went to the bank, rented a safe deposit box, and paid for it 10 years in advance. Before I left for Florida, I cleared out all my accounts and put the money in the safe deposit box. I knew I'd probably get jail time for what I'd done, but I didn't care because I'd set Amy up big time. She would lose everything in the fire, and there would be no insurance to replace any of it. She'd probably come after me to get it, but she couldn't get a dime from me while I was behind bars, and even when I was released, she'd play hell getting a single penny from me. Back in town, I stopped by the store to pick up my personal belongings that I had left there and apologized to Frank for leaving him in the lurch. He said he understood me, as he had gone through a pretty bitter divorce himself. He then asked me if I was okay and ready to go back to work. I had to tell him that I wasn't, that I would probably be going to jail for a while. He asked why, and I told him. He laughed and said he wished he had the guts to do something like that to his ex. I called Mike and invited him to lunch. He met me at Mario's, and after sitting me down at the table, he said, "You're really in trouble this time. Everyone wants a piece of your ass. You would have been better off staying where you were. The judge held you in contempt because he ordered you to keep house. The DA's office filed a bunch of charges against you, from arson to destruction of private property. Amy wants you nailed to a telephone pole so she can come to your house 2 or 3 times a day and whip you. However, you'll probably be pleased to know that as soon as Amy stopped keeping a roof over her head, Hal split." How can they silence an arsonist? It was my house, and I didn't cheat the insurance company. In fact, I canceled the insurance so they wouldn't get anything. The mortgage company is probably mad because they have no collateral on the loan, but I am still responsible for the loan and just sent them this month's payment last week. As long as I make the payments, they are in no danger. It was my house. I could do whatever I wanted with it. In your mind, that may be so, but I can assure you the court doesn't see it that way. He was right, of course, and after a month of wrangling, I worked out a plea agreement under which I served 3 years in the Albion State Correctional Institution. After serving half your sentence, you were eligible for parole, and when I was offered it, I declined. I didn't want to come under the scrutiny of a legal system that I had grown to hate and go through the whole, "do this, or I'll have to send you back," or "you can't do this, or you'll violate your parole." I was released after 2.5 years with a deferred sentence for good behavior. While in prison, I was visited regularly by Mike, my sister, and even Frank, who kept making me promise to come visit him when I got out. Janet even visited me a couple of times, making me promise to call her when I was released. Also, while I was in jail, I managed to file for bankruptcy and was able to get rid of all but one of the judgments against me from the IRS. It seems that the fact that I listed the interest on the house when I filed my tax return, yes, boys and girls, even in prison the IRS requires you to file a return if you had any income for that year, violated one of their rules, since the house didn't really exist anymore. Next chapter. As Megan and I sat at a table at Bud's bar and I was drinking a cold PBR, Megan asked me what was next. "Go see Frank and get back to work. Get an apartment and see what I can do to start having some sort of social life." "Are you going to see the kids?" "Probably not. Amy has them well brainwashed, and seeing them will entail seeing Amy, and if I see her, I'll go to jail. She doesn't want to see you either. He still wants to destroy you for burning everything she owned, but she's changed in the last couple years. She's really sorry about the way things turned out. She really thought she could have her cake and eat it too. She swears she loved you, and Hal was just entertainment, and you were never supposed to know about him. Anyway, she made it clear that she wouldn't mind you having a relationship with Brian and Susan." "Well, isn't that very nice of her, especially after she told them I wasn't really their father?" "Give her some slack, Rob. What she did, you did too. You both acted out of spite, and the kids got caught up in the middle of things. They spent a few weekends with me, and I can tell they miss you. You need to reconnect with them. I don't want to see Amy. If you can arrange for her to pick them up and take them to your place, we'll see how it goes." I stopped by Frank's and he said I could come back when I was ready, and I asked him to give me a week to get used to being away. I flew to Panama City, took the money out of the safety deposit box, and flew home. I settled things with the IRS, found an apartment, called Janet, and invited her over for dinner. Epilogue. I reunited with my children and started seeing them every weekend. Janet and I met a few times, but it was obvious that we would remain only friends. I found myself a girlfriend, and it looks like I will be saying yes to her in the not-too-distant future. She must be a wonderful person to be willing to burden herself with 2 kids just to be with me. Yeah, I have the kids now. Amy found a boyfriend and got married, but after 2 years of marriage, he came home early and found Amy in bed with another guy. Unfortunately for Amy and her lover, her husband was not the type to grab his cell phone and take pictures like I did. The hubby grabbed a gun and killed them both. There is no death penalty in our state, so he got 20 to life. I send him a box of cigarettes and a thank you card every month. When Amy was gone, I petitioned the court for custody, and it was granted. Now they live with me. I guess, as they say, it's true. All's well that ends well, at least for some of us. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.